12th, 2021, and the world has gone crazy. Let's talk about that this time around on the Outlaw Pulpit. It's mind boggling, isn't it? I mean, literally, we thought, or the perception was, that 2020 was somehow going to be left behind and 2021 was now going to be the year of peace and just everything was going to start going well for all of us and on and on. And you know how it goes. And there's nothing wrong with being optimistic. I personally, by nature, am a very optimistic person. And yet, I look at everything that's going on right now, and it's safe to say the world has gone nuts. And I want to talk about that this episode because there are a lot of things that, as Christians, we could jump on the bandwagon with. From social media to censorship to the presidency here in the United States to lockdowns over in Europe and all over the place. There's something going on. There's COVID, then there's this new strain of COVID. And I know personally, my family, we are 2 days away from everybody being out of quarantine because we all had the COVID bug. And it really, honestly, wasn't that bad. And I realize it's different for everybody, but for us, we did fine. Even my father, who's going to be 81 in a couple days, he did just fine. Little under the weather with fatigue, but he's doing good. But this brings it all back to what do we do in a world that is like this? I mean, currently, I guess there's a lot of issues that are on the forefront of the news these days. The biggest ones here, I can't speak for overseas in other countries, but the biggest ones here in the United States, as of right now, would be the censorship that's going on regarding Parler and the Amazon Web Services that pulling Parler, but now I heard that Parler found a new host for their app and all of that stuff. But you know, at the end of the day, you know, here's the thing. Here's my take on Facebook and Google and Twitter and everything. They are privately owned companies, okay, and so if they want to pull something like Twitter, for instance, they permanently shut down President Donald Trump's Twitter account. I'm not making a political post here, and I don't want to hear your political comments because that's not what I'm doing. But if a company like Twitter wants to shoot themselves in the foot to do that sort of thing, they have every right to do so. They are a privately owned company. If they want to do that, I mean, multiple websites and Business Times websites have announced that Twitter took a $5 billion with a B, $5 billion hit because of what they did to Donald Trump's Twitter account. And so if companies want to do this, then they're allowed to do that. If Facebook wants to shut people down or get rid of accounts, they are able and willing and are allowed to do that. Now that doesn't make things any easier. I mean, you got Amazon that shut down Parler and stuff. None of these are government entities, and so it's clear that they have their own thought process, and that doesn't usually work out very well when you're running a company and take a hard stance on one side or the other of the political spectrum. We had a little restaurant here in my hometown quite a few years ago. They took a hard stance that they were a Democratic headquarters. And so they did that. They put it in their windows and everything. Within a year, they were out of business. This is no slam to Democrats. This is no slam to Republicans. It's just that if you're running a business and you take a hard stance and say, we are Republican or we are Democrat, well, then you just basically shot yourself in the foot and you shunned away half of your business because of your stance on it. And that's what's happening with all of these social network sites and everything that's going on. Personally, I like the mixture of it. I like the intertwining of it because honestly, that makes for good discussion. That makes for camaraderie. That makes for a lot of different things in our society. But there's a bigger underlying issue that I want to talk about this episode, and that is how Christians are treating one another. I mean, Christians, they suck at being nice to each other. Honestly, they really do. I have a picture that I would love to put up on social networking somewhere if I can find it, and it shows a yellow caution sign, and it shows one person chasing another with a knife, and it says "Caution, Christians at play." And that really is the case. And if anything, these times that we live in right now are the times that Christians ought to rise to the occasion and shine, saying, we think differently, we may vote differently, we may act differently than one another, but we are supposed to love one another. In other words, all differences aside, if we were to go out for a dinner together, then you know what? We put our differences aside and we're here for the common cause, and that is the gospel of Jesus Christ. That actually sounds kind of like something that happened in the Bible, the Last Supper, or the disciples being picked. All of them were from different walks of life. And yet Jesus looked at him and said, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. Follow me, be my disciple." In John chapter 13, verse 35, it says, "By this everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another." All right. So this narrows the spectrum down quite a bit when you think about it, saying, love one another. Start there. Okay. Start there. Just there are people that are going to watch this Outlaw Pulpit and give it a thumbs down. They may not even watch the entire thing. They may just see that it's Pastor Bob 2.0. And because of that, the size of my head, whatever, they're going to give it a thumbs down. And there's going to be a lot of people that give it a thumbs up. But at the same time, no matter what our difference is, we are called to love one another. Now, that is a very narrow spectrum. He said, "They will know you are my disciples by the love you have for one another." In other words, man, just start by loving each other first, the Christians. Try to get along. If something comes up on your news feed on whatever platform you use that you don't agree with, man, keep scrolling. It's like the old days of TV where you didn't have Netflix and Hulu and on demand or TiVo or whatever DVR. If you didn't like something, flip the channel. That used to get me all the time in the church circles. Pastors would preach on the dangers of this television show, and it's like, there is a button on your remote, or if you go back far enough, a dial on your TV where you can literally switch the channel. And it's not a big deal. And so as Christians, maybe we need to get used to doing that. Just scroll. It's okay. You don't need to comment on everything. Not everybody's problems are going to be your problems. And so I think that's an important lesson to learn. Now, then the spectrum moves out a little bit. So Jesus says, you Christians, you guys that call yourself disciples of Christ, love one another. And then he goes into another talk later in one of the greatest commands is love your neighbor as yourself. And that actually begs the question, if I'm to love somebody like myself, well, then the question that I have to ask myself is, how much do I love myself? And that raises the question, are you comfortable in your own skin? Because a lot of people right now are lashing out at other people, pointing out things in other people's lives and the way they vote, the belief systems they have, the way they look and whatever. And yet what that actually does is points out their own insecurities in their own life. Remember the kindergarten principle that a lot of teachers taught? When you point your finger at somebody else, there's 3 more pointing right back at you. And so it kind of puts things into perspective, saying, hey, these times that we live in, crazy, okay? Absolutely crazy. But we have to start by loving each other first. We have to say, you know what? If you post something on Facebook that I don't get behind, that I don't agree with, I don't have to comment on it. I can scroll right past it. If you post something I like on Facebook, I can comment on that and whatnot, and that's okay. And I think true friends can do that. Even best of friends are going to have disagreements and different viewpoints on things. But what makes them friends is saying, despite differences, we still love one another. We still are there for one another. And so as we continue to navigate through this crazy world that we live in, and guess what? You're going to be hearing this message on Wednesday morning. I'm recording it on Tuesday night. By the time you listen to this message, there will be a ton more of craziness going on in the political world. Okay, there will be. I promise you that. And there will be a lot more happening in days and weeks to come. Just because it's 2021 doesn't necessarily mean it's going to get better. In fact, I saw one meme that says 2020 just turned 21 and now they can legally drink. That's the age you can legally drink in the United States. And with that comes problems. All right, you know what I'm talking about. And so let's make a pact. Let's make it a goal to love one another. Let's see what happens. Just for kicks. I mean, come on. As Christians, let's try to love one another because that's really who Christ is. That is the very nature of God. And if we are to be Christ-like, then that doesn't mean you get to be a schmuck on Facebook or any other social platform. It means you scroll by or you lovingly state your opinion. And if your opinion is shot down, so be it. It's okay. That is all right. I guarantee you, I I vote one way. If I ended up hanging out with somebody else who voted another way, I'd have no problem eating ice cream with them. Not a problem at all. Why? Because we can still talk about Packers. Man, Green Bay Packers are in the playoffs. They're taking on the Rams this week. And we can talk about outreach and we can talk about movies and all sorts of other things. And if we talk current events, politics, we can do it in, guess what? A cordial kind of way. Imagine that. So I leave with that verse, John 13:35. By this everyone will know you are my disciples if you love one another. Now let me just add this last little point before I sign off. If you don't love one another, guess what? You're not a disciple. Have a great day.